Hi everybody. Just a couple quick announcements for us before we begin today. Coming up in a couple of weeks, there's another cutoff where they want to have a little checkpoint for everybody, make sure that they're keeping up with the course. And so I just want to let you know that the checkpoint that I've suggested for people in the Java section is to have everything through week 10 finished, which is today, actually. So, so what that means is in 2 weeks from now, I would like to see you have everything finished through week 10. And to kind of help you out with that, next week is actually just kind of a scheduled open period. So I don't have any new stuff planned for next week, right? Next week is a catch-up week. If you had some assignments that you needed to fix up, if you had a couple sections that you struggled with, you need to go back and take a look at them. Next week is the day to take care of that kind of stuff. And if you're worried about finishing everything up, remember you have 2 weeks actually to get caught up through week 10. If that sounds like a lot to you, if you're far behind and you're wondering if that's even a goal that you'll be able to reach at this point, talk to me or talk to one of the mentors and we can chat and figure out what needs to happen to get you to that point. Are there any questions about that? If you want to check where you're at, of course, you can always go onto Canvas, learn.launchcode.com, and check. Well, I don't have it, I guess, because I'm not a student, but check the grades tab, and you should be able to see your grades for every assignment and your attendance as well for every week of the class. So it wouldn't hurt to just take a minute or two, go through, double check, make sure you've got everything submitted on there. And if not, let us know. We'll get you taken care of. I think that's all the announcements I had. Is there any questions? All right, so today I wanted to spend some time talking about the big project that was presented at the end of this section, which is the tic-tac-toe game. I don't know if you had a chance to get started on it. It's actually a surprisingly large program considering what it does. So if you got a chance to take a look at it, great. I know they posted a solution. I kind of wish they hadn't posted a solution, but they posted a solution. I'm not going to look at that. Actually, I haven't looked at it. I have no idea what the solution says at all. I hope you don't look at it either because it's definitely more rewarding and better practice to come up with your own solution. So I'm going to try and get us as far through this game today in class as we can. We may not get the whole thing done. Like I said, it's surprisingly large considering what it does. We may not get the whole thing done, but I'm going to try and get us as far as we can go. And it'll draw on every skill that we've been using basically since the beginning of class. So it's a great review. It's a nice little checkpoint for the first half of the course. So everybody's played tic-tac-toe, I hope, or if not, it's a very simple game. You just try and get 3 X's or 3 O's in a row. There's a little bit more to the computer version of this game. If you take a look at the instructions, they ask you to type in a number 1 through 9 that indicates where you want the player to move, and it just goes back and forth. 2 players entering their moves back and forth until one of 2 things happens. Either somebody wins the game, they get 3 X's or 3 O's in a row, or the whole board is filled up and nobody has won, in which case it's a tie, it's a draw game. So there's a lot of things that we need to do, and I want to try and make a plan. I don't just want to dive in and start writing code. I want to make a plan. So I'm going to start up a new file here, but I'm not going to write code at first. I'm just going to write some notes. I'm going to take some notes about what we need to do. So I'm going to create a new class, call it tic-tac-toe. Okay. We know we are going to need this public static void main, as we always do. And I want to take some notes. There's 2 basic categories of things that we need. There's 2 basic categories of things that we need to achieve our goal here. We need to decide what are the pieces, what are the things, right? What are the building blocks that we need to form our program. So, what are the pieces that we need? And then we also need to decide what needs to happen. What are the actions? What are the behaviors? What are the things that we need to do? So, behaviors. And what I wanted to do before we start writing any code is try and come up with as many of these as we can. I don't expect us to be able to sit down and think of every single detail right off the bat, but I at least want to think of some of them and go into this thing with a plan so that we're not totally blind. So let's start with behaviors. I'm thinking generally. I don't want to hear things like loops. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear things like if statements right now. That's not what I'm asking. In general terms, in English, what are some of the behaviors that we need our program to do to play this game? Interact with players. Can we be a little bit more specific?
Receive input from users.
Input. So, what square do you want to play, right? Okay. What else?
Gotta convey what the squares are called. You can ask that question.
So we need to display the game board, right? We need to show the current state of the board to the players. So we need to display the game board. Okay, what else? When are we done?
We need to explain how the game is over.
So we need to figure out if the game's over or not, right? So we need to check to see if someone wins. Or the board is full, right? That's another option.
What marks go on the board?
What marks go? I'm sorry?
Like if it's an X or an O or what that looks like, or is that pieces?
I think I'm glad you asked. Actually, let's think about. We can actually quantify these a little bit more. Behaviors are actions; they're verbs, whereas pieces I would call nouns. So when you tell me X's and O's, that actually feels like it's a good question. So we need the actual X's and O's. We can start on some of these since we're talking about it now. What else do we need? Where are the X's and O's going to go? We need a board, right? We need a playing board. We need somewhere to put the X's and O's, so we need a game board. Those are the two big things. There are probably others that we need. Like I said, I don't expect us to nail down every single thing right at the moment. I'm just trying to come up with a plan, trying to get things started. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add to either one of these categories before we maybe start writing some code?
You can check to see if a place is already taken.
So we need to, actually this kind of goes with this part, right? What square do you want to play? We also need to make sure that whatever they choose isn't already occupied, right? So you could almost put that underneath this section. Make sure space isn't occupied. Okay, this is enough to get us started. This is more than enough to get us started. So we'll go ahead and start writing some code now. And we have this list, which makes our lives kind of easy. Easier, let's say, not easy. The pieces, the nouns, those are going to become variables. They're things. They're actual concrete things. They'll become variables, or they might become inputs to methods. The behaviors, the actions, are going to become the methods. They're going to become the functions, the methods that we write. So, where do we want to start? It doesn't really matter which one we pick. We could start somewhere. Let's start with one that I think is maybe relatively simple, straightforward, and will give us a review of some of the concepts that you learned about this week. Sorry, lost my charger here. Whoops. Display board. What inputs do we think this method might need in order to do its job? What board are we going to be displaying? Do we have one? No, so maybe we need one. All right. So now we have another decision to make. What should our board look like? What should the type of that be? I'm sorry?
The tic-tac-toe board.
The tic-tac-toe, yeah, the tic-tac-toe board, yeah. What should the data type of that be? String, okay, so I heard string, I heard array. What about both? String array? String array? When you see the 3x3 grid, that tells you even more information about the array, right? What kind of array? A two-dimensional array. It's got rows and columns. So that screams two-dimensional array to me when I see it. So I think a two-dimensional array, I would accept string. I heard somebody say characters. I think characters would also work. They both kind of have their pros and cons. They're both suitable for the task. I would even accept int. I would be okay with that, right? I think string was the first one I heard, so we'll just go with that. And like I said, if you don't see it this way, you prefer some other type here, it's your program. Go with it. Realize that this might change a few other things later on down the road, but we'll use a string array. What did I do wrong here? I did something wrong, and I just don't see what I did. Oh, I see it now. Do you see it?
You're inside of the.
I'm inside of the main method, yep. I tried to create this method inside of my main method. I really just forgot where I was. I wasn't paying attention. I forgot where I was. I can't do this. I need to move this outside. Okay. There we go. That's better. And so you see string array, it's two-dimensional, and I know that because I see two sets of brackets there. Do I know how big this is?
Yeah.
So yes, I heard yes and no. Probably yes because we played tic-tac-toe before and we know that there's 3 rows and 3 columns, right? So yes, we know how big this is, but just looking at this thing right here, I don't necessarily know how big this thing is. I have to assume, I have to hope, right? I have to take kind of a leap of faith and say, I really want this to be 3x3, so hopefully that's what it is, right? Or actually, if you wanted to, you could do a little bit more than that. You could check it. You could say, is this 3x3? And if it's not, then you could print out a message or say, hey, we have a problem here. We'll just assume that it is going to be 3x3 for now. How do I print out an array? I think actually what I see a lot of people try to do is something like this. It seems straightforward enough, right? Is this gonna cut it?
Because you don't know how big it is. Oh, you just said that.
I can't do it like this because I need to. What am I going to see if I try to do this?
Bunch of random letters.
Bunch of random letters, bunch of random stuff. Those actually mean something. Those random letters and that random stuff is the memory location. Where on the computer is this array? That's what that means. That does us no good. That doesn't help us at all. That's not what we want. We want to see what the stuff is inside of the array. So how do I see what's actually inside of the array? Not like this. What do I have to do instead?
Set the array or string with the 2 brackets.
String with the 2 brackets.
You have to, I don't know, using a for loop.
Yeah, there we go. Use a loop. To do what? What's
Print each variable.
we need to output not a variable,
Each index.
each element, yeah. Each individual piece of the array. I can't just print out the array as one big chunk. I have to visit each part of the array and print it out one at a time. That's what I have to do. So let's do that. I need a for loop. Oops. So what do I want to say? I less than
Board.length.
board.length. we know, or we hope, that this is going to be 3, right? We really hope it's going to be 3, but this will work even if it's 4 or 10 or 1, right? Okay, so I've got my loop, and now I can start printing things out, correct?
No,
I need another one. Why?
because it's a two.
It's 2-dimensional. So this loop here that I wrote, what's that for?
For the first.
So there's 2 possible answers here, right? Rows or columns? Which one is it? Rows. Probably rows. Probably rows. I need another one for the columns.
Would there ever be a reason to assign the columns or y-axis first? Like, did that ever happen?
You could. You certainly could. Trying to think of a good example as to when that might happen. So think about it. Let's think about it this way. The way that we've set these up, how am I traveling across this array? How am I moving? I have this 3x3 grid. Where am I going to start? What's the first thing I'm going to see? What's the first element? I'm sorry?
0,
0, 0. So where is that in the board? Which top left, right? And then where do I go next?
To the right.
0, 1, which is directly to the right, and then to the right, and then I hit the end of the row, so I go down. So it's just like reading a book, right? I go across, go across, go across. So your question was, is there ever a reason why we might want to prioritize the columns over the rows? And yes, if I need to go down, right, and then down, and then down, then iterating through the columns instead of the rows would be perfectly valid. Most humans, I think, would prefer to do things left to right, like a book. That's just kind of how we view the world. But there are other things in life that doesn't really work out for. So yeah, can totally happen. What goes here?
board bracket 0.
Board bracket 0 dot length. What is this actually saying? I thought board was 2 dimensions, right? So why do I just have 1 pair of brackets here? What am I actually saying?
If we were just on that 0 row, how many columns does it have?
Exactly. What is the length of the first row? What is the length of row number 0? That'll tell me how many columns there are. Do all the rows have the same number of things in them? The answer 99% of the time is yes. However, it is possible to have what we would call a jagged array where the rows aren't exactly the same size. You're not going to see that very often, so I'm not going to worry about that. But yeah, it's asking what the length of the first row is. Okay, and now we can actually print stuff, right? We want to print board I, since we said the first row is for the first loop is for the rows, and then J, the second loop is for the columns. Do I want print ln here? We can test this out and see. Let's try it. Let's make a string array that we'll use for testing purposes. I'll just do it this way. 3, 3. Oh, I forgot to give it a name. Whoops. And let's put some values in this thing. We'll put some X's and O's in there. Doesn't really matter where they go right now. It's just for, testing purposes. Oh, why? Whoops. Sorry. I don't know what game I was playing. And then we'll... So I put an X in there, I put an O in there, right? Put an X in there, I put an O in there, and then I told it to print out. And so I'm hoping that it'll look like a tic-tac-toe board. Not a complete tic-tac-toe board, There's only 2 things in it, but let's see what it looks like. Let's see what it looks like. I ran the wrong program, I'm sorry. Okay. So, interesting. Null, 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 null. There's my O, null, null, X. So, we got somewhere, but we're not quite there yet. We got some problems that we need to fix. Anybody have some suggestions on what we can do to fix some of these issues?
Put a print line inside the outer loop after the inner loop,
Good. Put a print line inside the outer loop,
and then make the inside one print.
and then, yeah, perfect. Put a print line here, and then make this print. This will fix part of our problem. So here, this one's print because these values are all in the same row. How do I know that? Because I'm going down the columns, right? Then when I get to the end of the row, what do I need to do? I need to go back to the beginning of the line and start over again. So this does that for me. It's like a typewriter. I'm typing, I'm typing, I'm typing, I'm typing. I hit the end of the road, or the end of the page, and then I push the typewriter all the way back to the beginning, and I'm typing, typing, typing. So this will fix some of our problems. Let's see. All right, we're getting there. It looks more like a tic-tac-toe board, but not quite like a tic-tac-toe board. Right? Any other suggestions as to how we can help make this look even better? What's the nulls about?
There's nothing.
There's nothing in it. There's nothing in it. So what I would really like to do is see, what, a blank space? How can I fix that? There's at least a couple ways I can think about how to fix that. An if statement. Where would I put it? Where would I put that if statement? What would I be looking for with that if statement? If what?
If there's no X or O, leave it blank. Or
Yeah, if there's no X or O, or I could say the opposite. I could say if this is null, put a space in there instead, right? So let's try that. If board I j is equal to null, if it's empty, we're gonna put a space. Else, we will put whatever happens to be in that spot, which should be an X or an O, right? Does that make sense, what I just did there? See if it's empty. If it is, I don't want to see the word null. I want to see something a little better. I want to see a space. If it's not empty, then print out whatever's in the spot. Let's try it and see where we're at. Okay, I think this is progress. The nulls are gone. Looks a little better. It's still a little off though, right? I can't see the empty spaces very clearly. In fact, if you go look at the instructions for a little refresher, you can see that they want you to put little, actually they put dots in there, which would have been a better thing, but they also want you to put lines in between each one. I want you to put lines in between each one. So the dot thing is easy to fix. I put spaces. Maybe that was a bad call. Let's put a dot. That'll help. Okay, that's already looking better. And you could even probably stop there and call it good. But we were specifically asked to put lines in between the columns. So how am I going to do that? Print a line where? Where's that going to happen? Where should that line get printed out? After the dot? It might not be a dot though, right? It could be an X or an O, and I still probably want a line, right? So maybe after this whole thing? All right, let's try this. Print out a line right there. So print out, maybe it's a dot, maybe it's an X or an O, doesn't matter, print it out either way, and then put a line after it. Let's check and see. Oh, so close. So close. See what the problem is? I got this extra line that I don't need. Any ideas? Yeah, if it's not equal to 2, which would be the very leftmost column, right? Or I'm sorry, the very rightmost column. Then I print out the line. If j is not equal to 2, then I'll print out this line. All right. There we go. That looks much better. It looks exactly like the instructions told us to make it look. Let me scroll down to what we did and pause here for a moment and see if there are any questions before we move on to the next section. I know we've been at this for a while and we haven't even started picking X's. I told you guys this was surprisingly large amount of stuff. Yeah.
I was doing a character,
Okay, sure.
but I couldn't figure out how to do the if statement check. No, it wouldn't let me do that for character.
Wouldn't let you do that for a character. So if you used a character array, what would it put in there? I'm not sure I actually know. What does it print out? When you try to print out an empty space, what does it print out? An empty space. Okay.
Just says operator double equals can't be applied to character.
Well,
I tried dot equals.
you definitely can use double equals with character, but I don't think they can be null, which I know is a subtle distinction to make. The difference, so let me try and explain what the difference. We're using strings, and when I create a string array, the empty spots all get initialized to null. But if I were to do an array of integers, what would the blank spots be initialized to? 0. Why not null for ints? There's a reason. The reason is that integers and characters, for that matter, are something that we call primitive types. Whereas a string, remember the capital S at the beginning of the string indicates that it is a object. So objects are always going to default to null, whereas things like ints and characters are going to default probably to 0. I would actually check to see if 0 might work for your comparison with the characters. It may not, but it would be, it's the best guess that I have. And if
I could just change it to string. I'm just curious.
well, you could do that as well, right? But I'm 100% positive that there's a way to make it work with characters, if that's the choice that you wanted to make. So if comparing it against 0 here doesn't work, then that would be something that the internet certainly could answer. Does it work?
Yeah, it works.
That's kind of what I thought. Cool. All right. Any other questions before we move on to the next piece? Okay. So one thing down, we can display the game board, right? What should we do next? We need to start asking people where they want to play, checking to see whether they won or not. Well, we could do that. I mean, we don't need, just trying to think what's the best use of our time. Let's actually do this one. Let's check to see if somebody wins. Let's check that first, and then we'll go back and let people pick X's and O's. Okay. So it's not just a matter of checking to see if somebody wins, but who won, right? Who is the winner of the game? Not just if somebody won, but who the winner is. So we'll make a method. If I want to make a method that returns who won the game, what should the return type be? I'm sorry? A string, right? The winner is either X or O. Those are the two options that I have. So oops. Do I need any inputs here to make this method work? What am I going to use to see if there's a winner or not?
Name. Oh.
How do I know if somebody won or not? I have to look at what?
The array.
I have to look at the array. I have to look at the game board, right? So I need that game board. Oops. I need that game board in order to see if there's a winner or not. Okay, so we're playing tic-tac-toe. Somebody can win if they get 3 in a row, and that can happen down the rows, down the columns, or down the diagonals, right? I would suggest breaking those things up. We don't need to do it all at once. Let's just pick one of those 3. We can do the rows first. Let's just check the rows and see. We don't even have to do all 3 of the rows. Let's just check one row. How do we check one row and see if they're all 3 the same or not? Any ideas? How do I check to see if the very beginning row has everything the same or not? If statement seems like a good place to start. If what? They're all the same. How do I say that? Board 0, 0 equals dot equals, good, equals board 0, 1. So if the top left square equals the top middle square, right? And then what else needs to be true? And I see your question. Give me 1 second. Let me finish this up. And board 0. Does it matter? I mean, I need 0, 2. Does it matter what I compare it to? I can compare it to either 0 or 1. I could put a 0 there. I could put a 1 there. It doesn't make a bit of difference in terms of what we're trying to do, right? What was your question? Sorry.
I am struggling to know how you made the quick decision to go with dot equals.
Mm-hmm. I use dot equals when we were comparing strings.
Okay.
And you'll notice that there's actually an exception to that rule that we already used today, which is right here.
Thank you.
Which is maybe what confused you.
Yeah. So why is that permissible but
Yeah. So is null a string?
it's an empty? Well, it's an empty string, so
Null is sort of defies type, right? Null doesn't have a type. I think of null as a black hole. Like quite literally, null is like the absence of anything. So it doesn't follow the same rules, right? And actually, though, it should be noted that if this is empty, this square doesn't have anything in it, it's null, equals will still work. It'll still work. In fact, we could have even probably, could we have used dot equals here? That's an interesting question. Let's try it and find out. I'm actually not sure. Actually not certain if dot equals would work there. It might. Nope. Well, no. Oh. It's mad about something else. because I didn't finish my if statement. That's why it's angry at me. That's my fault. Return, no, winner. Just to make it happy. This may or may not be the correct thing to do. I'm just trying to make it happy for right now, so it stops yelling at me. Null pointer exception at line 21. Yeah, doesn't like it. Doesn't like it. That's actually a problem then for us down here, isn't it? So we kind of ran into an issue. There's a way we can fix that. Well, there's a couple ways. Like all things in programming, there's a couple ways we can fix this problem. The problem being if this is empty, or if any of these squares are empty, we're in trouble. It doesn't know what to do with that. So there's a couple ways I can think of solving this problem.
Add another and.
Add another and check to see if I have nulls. That's going to make this very long, right? Because now I have to check all three spots. There's maybe an easier way that we can do things. And this is maybe a behavior that we could have specified but didn't, which is make a blank game board, right? Make a fresh starting point, make somewhere brand new to start with. And instead of having empty spots, what can we do instead that will make our lives a little bit easier? We're not using blanks, we're using dots. I could fill the whole thing with dots at first. That'll just make my life easier in the long run anyway, right? So let's do that. We can do that. I know we're going off on a different track right now than what we were doing. That's programming. That is programming. We tried to do something, we discovered a problem, gotta go fix that problem, and then we can get back to what we're doing. So let's make a new, make new board. Actually, so let's talk about inputs and outputs here. Do I need any inputs to this one? No. I'm starting with nothing and making a new game board. Do I need any outputs? Yes. I heard two answers for that one. I heard no and a yes. Output the board that I made, right? I want to give you back the board that I made. I'm making a new board. I want to give that back to you. So let's output the board that we made, and the type of that is going to be a string array. So I want to make a new board. I know exactly how many rows and columns I want that board to have, correct? So let's do that. Board. All right, and now it's empty. And by empty, I mean very empty. It's got nulls in it. That's not what we want. We want it to be filled with dots. So how do I fill this thing with dots?
Set each square.
Yeah, I mean, set each square, so I could do that like this, right? But I'm not even through the first line and I'm already tired of doing this. Is there a different way? Loops. Loops. In fact, it's going to be this exact set of loops that we had before. When you're working with two-dimensional arrays or even one-dimensional arrays or just any kinds of arrays, right? Loops are your friends. This exact set of loops can help us here. So I'm just going to copy-paste them. I know in school they told you you're not allowed to copy-paste stuff. In programming, you are totally allowed. As long as you understand why you're doing it. This will accomplish my goal, correct? Or no? Does anybody have a problem?
You have to make it out print.
Yeah, I am missing something. Printing, I don't think is quite what we need, but I do need a return statement. Do need a return statement. Okay. Are there any questions I'm intentionally pausing here because I know I just did some stuff really fast. I want to give people a chance to catch up if they're following along. Here's a question I have for you all. We made this fundamental change to our program. We were thinking about the tic-tac-toe board in one way, and then we decided that way is actually not working for us. I want to think about it a little bit differently. Does that change anything else that we've done? Does that change any other code that we've written so far?
Yeah, the display board.
Yeah. We were checking for null before. That's what set this whole thing off in the first place, right? Is that this line was kind of bothering, or actually it was down in the other one that we were working on. I don't have to worry about this anymore, right? This whole if statement, what's going to happen to it? If I look at a square on my tic-tac-toe board, what are the possible things that I expect to see there?
Dot, X, or Y.
A dot, an X, or an O. That's it. So I don't need to worry about this special situation anymore, right? It's not even a thing. We just fixed that all together. So I can actually get rid of this entire if statement, which worked very well for us at the time. The if statement itself was great. Did a great job. But we changed our view of the world. We changed how we're using this tic-tac-toe board, and it just no longer was necessary for us. This is cleaner design. Removing code, that actually makes me feel good. The less code that I have, the fewer places I have to make a mistake. And I'm going to be making mistakes all the time. Okay. Now I think we can get back to what we were doing before, which is seeing if we have a winner or not. But before we do that, I want to make sure that I'm not bouncing around like a crazy man. Does anybody have any questions, comments, other things? Yes?
My return, since I can't resolve the symbol. Oh, well, when I just do return board,
Mm-hmm.
it says incompatible types.
Okay, so check the type that you created your board with against what you said the return type was going to be. They need to be the same. They need to match. And I mean, it needs to match down to the fact that saying a one-dimensional array here is not good enough. I created a two-dimensional array that I'm returning. It has to be a two-dimensional array specified as my return type. All right. Let's go back to determining if we have a winner or not. I think this if statement's going to work now. I'm not worried about it. I think it's going to work just fine. Except for there's one problem. We added another little wrinkle.
They already equal each other.
They already do when?
When the board's a new board.
When the board's empty. They could all three be empty, right? And this would still be okay. And this would still tell me that we have 3 in a row. How do I fix that?
Added an additional and.
Add another and, yeah. And what? And does it matter which one I pick? I want to say equals, or would it be faster to say not equals? Yeah. Does not equal a dot? So I put the exclamation point out front. Does not equal a dot. All right. Who's the winner? Did X win or did O win? Why do I keep saying Y? Did X win or did O win?
We don't know.
We don't know, but I do know who the win. I know where I can find that information, right? Where would I get that information? From 0, 0 or 0, 1, or right? Pick one of the values out. That's my winner. It doesn't really actually matter to me which one it is. I just need to return that information. So return board 0, 0. Maybe that's an X, maybe that's an O. I don't care. That's who won. That's whatever letter is in that row. Right? All right, so one row down, but I actually have 3 rows. And then we have the columns and the diagonals to worry about as well. You could just take this whole thing and, you know, copy it 2 more times and do the second row and the third row. I think there's a better way though. A loop. A loop. Do this for the 3 rows. I think we only need 1 loop here. Even though it's a 2-dimensional array, I think we only need 1 loop, right? Because I'm just checking the rows, right? Oops. Sorry, just trying to fix my indentation. So then what changes about this code now that I have this loop? What changes? I'm sorry? 0? 0 becomes I. Zero becomes I. Okay, everybody with me on that one? My claim is that this will check all 3 rows to see if somebody's won. We also need to check the columns. That's going to look very similar to this, right? It's going to look very similar to this. In fact, one approach that you might take is to take this whole loop, everything inside of it, copy it again, and use the columns instead of the rows. I don't think you actually need another loop though. I think we could use this loop. Do you see that? Do you see how I could use this loop to do my job? The loop's already going from 0, 1, and 2, which is exactly what I need for the columns as well, right? I have an equal number of rows and columns, so I can actually leverage this loop in both directions. If I was checking the rows before, then if I swap them, if I swap these, now I'm checking the columns, correct? So all I need to do is swap these guys.
Why don't you put J?
Do I have a J? No, I mean, it's a good question. Why don't I put J? I don't have one. I don't need one. I don't have a J because I don't need one. I is going 0, 1, 2. I want to use that to check row 0, row 1, and row 2. But I also want to check column 0. Right? Column 0, column 1, column 2. Oh. Okay. This should be an I, and this should also be an I. I missed that before. All right, my claim to you now is that we've done the rows and the columns. This if statement's checking the rows, this if statement's checking the columns. Do we have any questions about that? The only thing we're missing then is the diagonals. I wish I had a whiteboard so I could draw stuff on here, but let me draw it on the computer as best as I can then instead. The coordinates of the squares are something like this, right? And then I'll just copy paste. Oops. So here's my tic-tac-toe board, right? Upper left corner 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2. What do you notice? What's the pattern about this diagonal from the top left to the bottom right? They're the same. They're the same, right? What about going backwards? Do we see a pattern there? They kind of crisscross, right? One starts at 2 and counts down, the other starts at 2 and at 0 and goes up. So we need to somehow account for these two patterns. Now, you could actually, I think, put more if statements in here for those two situations, but just to keep things a little bit more straightforward, we can make another loop for some of these diagonals. So we said that for the upper left to the bottom right, the numbers are the same, correct? So if I have something going from 0 to 2, I could just use the same number in both positions, and that would be okay. Or let me show you what I'm getting at here. Instead of saying I and 0, I would just say I. Actually, I don't know that this is doing what I need it to. Let me think about this for a second. This isn't working the way that I want it to. Hold on. I'm gonna back up a second. You know what? How would you do that with a loop? I'm not even sure. Well, let's just do it with an if statement then. That's fine. I'll copy this if statement and we'll just hard code the values in that we want since we know what they are. This isn't very satisfying to me. This almost feels like I'm kind of giving up, which is maybe true, actually. I feel like there's a way to use a loop in here. I just can't quite wrap my brain around what it is. If somebody can think of a clever way to use a loop to solve this problem instead, I would love to hear about it. But I'm just putting the numbers in there instead. And I would need to do the same thing for the other diagonal as well. From 0 to 1, 1, and 2, 0.
Would you not be able to assign new variables for calculating the position in the grid?
I'm sorry?
Would you not be able to assign a new variable for calculating the position in the grid that would come here?
I mean, you could. So I was making a loop to go from 0 to 2 and saying I. But what I'm struggling with, and I'm sure there's a solution, is that the first time through the loop I'd be looking at this square, the second time through the loop I'd be looking at this square, and the third time I'd be looking at this square. So I think maybe your idea of creating a variable is the key there.
That it would to encompass.
It's almost like taking the max of an array like we saw last week. Look at what this first value is, compare this value to that, compare this value to that. And if they all come out the same, then you must have 3 in a row.
What would happen if you made it like I, and then each time you increased I?
Yeah, I think that's what you would do. I think that's what you would do. I think you would say, oops. I think you would need a variable. First, I think you would need a variable. Player equals, see who's in the top left corner, and then check to see if board at II is equal to whatever that player is, right? Or what we're at, yeah. I mean, what are we looking for? We're looking for 3 in a row. you can actually kind of already see that this has actually become a little bit more complicated than just typing it out this way. Because I had to introduce a loop and an extra variable, and actually I probably would need another variable to keep track of whether they're all the same or not. I think it's in terms of simplicity, this is fine. Just you know what the numbers are. Just check them. I think we're done actually with this method, but we should test it. We really should test it. And testing it, I think, would require a few different things. It would require checking the rows and the columns and the diagonals. Actually, in this particular situation, I'm not going to do this because it would take too long, but if I was making this for real, I'd test every single possible one. All the rows, all the columns, and both diagonals. But we can just do one of them to see if it is working well enough. There I have 3 X's. Is it a row or a column that I've got them in? It's a column. It's the very last column. Very rightmost column is 3 X's in a row. So we can display the board, but then we can also determine the winner of this board. And hopefully it tells me that X is the winner. There are no O's, so X cheated anyway. But it should at least say that X is the winner. It got 3 in a row. Let's run it and see what happens here. Uh-oh. Oh, I see. Whoops. So I kind of screwed up. There's these nulls. I thought we got rid of those. What happened? What did I do? We never called this method. We made it, right? We made the method. We never called it. I'm still using the same board that I had before. So I'll say make new board instead. All right, there's my board. It sure looks like X won the game, but it's not telling me that anywhere. Why not? Why isn't it telling me that X won? I have to print it out, yeah. It returned a value. I need to print out what that value is. I want to see it. Oh, it told me the dot won the game. Whoops. So close, kinda. But that means somewhere we didn't properly check to make sure that there wasn't a dot in there, right? It looks like that's what I'm doing here. And the board is not equal to a dot. I checked for that here as well. Does anybody see what the problem is? I think I kind of know what the issue is, but it's a little tricky. So what should have happened? I found a column, right? I have a column where all 3 are the same. So which part of my code is checking the columns? Let's start there. Which of these if statements is checking the columns? The second one, this one, right? So it should say that this one is equal to that one, right? This one's equal to that one. I check to make sure that this guy is not a dot. And then what? It says return this value. Does anybody see the problem? I'm sorry? I went through this and swapped the order of them, but I missed one. This is returning, so this would have been column number 2, so I equals 2. It checked it, found that they were all the same, and then returned whatever was in row number 2 in the bottom corner, which is a dot. So it actually correctly found that they all matched. It just didn't return the right winner because I forgot to swap them. All right, let's try again. There it is. X won the game. I would want to keep testing this. I should be able to switch this to be O's, and it should tell me that O won the game. I should be able to do diagonals. I should be able to do rows. It should still tell me that it won the game. We've checked off a lot of the behaviors on our list. The one major one that we didn't do is this one, asking the users for input about what square they want to play. Unfortunately, it's already past my allotted time, and you did have an assignment that you needed to demo today, so I don't want to take any more time away from that, but I've given you a huge chunk of this project. This is really the last major piece, and I can give you a couple quick hints on this one to kind of wrap up before we switch over to the second half. I want to keep going as long as somebody has not won the game, right? Or the board is full. We actually never checked that either. We never checked to see if the board was full. What kind of structure am I going to use to keep going until somebody wins? Do I know how many moves that's going to take? I know at most there are 9 moves, right? But it could be less than that.
So why?
A while loop, I think, is a good choice. While somebody has not won the game, right? Nobody's won the game, and the board is not full. There are still empty spaces. How would you check to see if there are still empty spaces? There's a couple ways you could do it. I could go through and look for a dot. If there's a dot anywhere in here, I know there's still empty spaces. Or I could just count, right? How many moves have been made? Once I get to 9, I know that it has to be full. So while nobody's won yet, ask the current player where they want to go. Show them the board, right? Ask them where they want to go. They type in the number. You then have to take that number and figure out what position they were, referring to in the array. So if they type in 5, that's the middle number, right? But we don't call this position 5. We call this position 1, 1. So how do you get from 5 to 1, 1? That's a problem that would need to be solved. And then once they make that play, you update the game board accordingly. You switch whose turn it is, and then you start the process all over again. In fact, I'll give you one final hint, and then I'll shut up. We're going to need something to track whose turn it is. We need some kind of a variable to specify whose turn it is. Player 1 or player 2, X or O, however you want to think about it. We covered a big chunk of this, though, and I think we actually covered some of the more difficult pieces of this. If you want to talk about this, if you want to work on it for the rest of today or even into next week and ask questions about it, I'd be happy to talk to you about this. I'll happily post this code onto Slack. I'll do it right now, actually. And then we'll be around to take attendance, and you had a temperature assignment, I believe, to demo today. Also, too, just a reminder, if you're worried about meeting the deadline in 2 weeks, the deadline's not for 2 weeks, let us know about that too. We'll be happy to talk to you about what we can do to help you meet that deadline. All right, I'm done. Let us know what you need.